Hi guys, welcome to the Craft Beer channel and welcome to Ireland. This is our first bit of content we've ever done in this country, and we've come to what I regard as one of the most exciting breweries in the country. We're here at White Hag and I'm here with Joe, head brewer. Tell us a little bit about White Hag and a little bit about Ireland.
Right, so the White Hag was founded on paper in 2013. We got our first brew going in 2014, and basically it was a group of Irish guys that really liked beer, but didn't know how to make it, I guess.
Yep.
So they hired me. I got my start back at Hop and Frog in Akron, Ohio, and very small boutique brewery, but kind of known amongst the geeky circles.
Yep.
Ireland at the time, when I came over, was a budding craft beer scene, and there was only, I think when I came over here, about 22 breweries. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of come over and in a new budding market and kind of hopefully make my mark.
What was your vision for it? What were those breweries producing?
Yeah, so without being rude, when I came over, I spent an entire week in late 2013, just myself and Paul Mullen, the managing director here now. We spent a week just traveling the country and trying all the different beers that were available at the time. And what I noticed was that there was a lot. It was really conservative. It was a conservative beer market. So
even the new guys coming out were
even new guys. You had
safe.
a lot of pale ale, red ale, stout, and actually it's kind of a joke now with all the breweries. We call it the Holy Trinity. Pale ale, red ale, stout. So
which is quite new. I mean, in the UK, you'd barely see red ales, so that was a real theme in Ireland, the Irish red.
It was, yeah, and I think there was a bit of a kind of I think everybody thought that they had to make a red ale.
Yeah,
but nobody really knew who was drinking them, and we still get requests for red ales, but they never really sell. It was an interesting time, but now I think we're over 100 breweries in the country in the 4 years that I've been here. So it's
Well, coming from the UK, they're starting to get some excitement with you guys and Whiplash, and Galway Bay have had a bit of hype for a little while. But I don't think any of those guys are really doing what you're doing here. So I mean, this kind of barrel collection would be impressive even in some American breweries.
Yeah. Like I said, I started my home brewing adventure started in 1997. I was a young guy. I was only 17 years old, brewing in my dad's basement, and so I've been doing kind of the stouts and the IPAs and all that stuff for a very long time. I really kind of took to, say, sour beers and alternative fermentation type beers, Brett beers, and lambic style stuff a long time ago. There really wasn't a market for it, and we released probably the first intentional Irish sour beer in I think 2015 with our Heather, and if we sold 20 cases of it, I'd be surprised.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was true in Belgium and in the 80s.
Yeah, nobody wanted them.
Yeah.
The Heather Sour, so this was really an exciting thing for me because it really challenged me as a brewer. When I was hired, I was still living in the United States, and they had already picked out the name and everything. They were calling it the White Hag Irish Brewing Company. So I thought that it was really important for us to find and kind of try to focus on an Irish beer. I had to dig deeper, and I actually took me back to this region of Ireland, and we're talking about Iron Age times. There was archaeological evidence of a beer or an ale produced in this region of the world that was made with heather because hops didn't grow.
Yep.
As we're standing here now, you can hear
cold
the rain.
And cloudy and rainy. Yeah.
So hops don't like rain. They need sunshine, especially in the later months when the flowers start to ripen. So, but we all know that brewers from all over the world used whatever they had available to them. So heather ale was what I found to be a true kind of Irish ale, especially west of Ireland. So I spent 9 months researching this, and what I set out to produce was a reproduction of this actual ancient Irish
Historic
beer.
style, yeah.
So we know that they used stones, much like there's a German called Steinbachs where they heat stones, and then the stones would get thrown into the mash or whatever, and to create the cooking action. We didn't want to do that with our stainless steel tanks.
Put some dents in it.
Yeah, but what we do know is that the main fuel source was peat, much like Scotland. So we had the turf. So what we did was we used a small amount of peat and malt to kind of give that slight smoky character that would have been imparted by the stones. To kind of replicate that brewing style, we did a really long boil. So we do a 3-hour boil. We put heather into the mash. So we just kind of act like we don't really know what we're doing. We're just kind of act like we're old, ancient brewers.
Yeah.
We just throw everything into one pot, and we boil, the crap out of it. And then when we transferred it, the very first batches, we transferred into the fermenters. And instead of pitching yeast, because they wouldn't have known what yeast was that long ago, we just took a ton of heather, which is the flowers of the plant, and we put that into the fermenter, and kind of did like what I would call like a natural inoculation.
So that's just wild yeast that's on the flower.
Yeah, it's wild yeast,
kicking off the fermentation.
wild bacteria. The Belgians might be gathering that from the air. We're basically doing it just from what we would have had available to us, and not really knowing what, and just letting the magic happen naturally. Yeah. And we now culture that yeast. So we've since kind of taken the variables out of it, and we just keep that going. So we no longer, put heather in the fermenters and hope for the best. Now we have a culture that we keep going.
But it's still completely unique to you. In front of us we have two different barrels of the barrel-aged heather sour. Yeah. So what are the barrels and what are the differences between these two?
Because it's a natural fermentation process, that it's very similar to kind of what they have in Belgium, where you have a slower souring period of time. The yeast kind of come in, they eat most of the sugars, and then it takes time for that kind of acidity to develop. But when we look at what the importance of that is that acidity actually is acting as a preservative. So, lowering the pH prevents things like mold and unwanted bacteria from taking hold. So this was very important to these ancient brewers, and we're trying to replicate that here with our program. So we have, as you said, we're standing literally in front of a wall of barrels, and I think there's about 80 of these barrels have this beer in it, and ranging from older to younger batches.
Yeah. So we talked about this earlier. The main difference is put this against your nose compared to that. There's a huge difference in aging that isn't just down to the oxidation that's changing the colour. There's more's been eaten, more's been broken down.
Right. So what you're smelling there, that's an older barrel, and that's older by probably at least almost nearly half a year.
Yep.
And so you I don't know if it's visible here, but you'll see a darker color. The aroma becomes more intense. The acidity becomes more intense.
I mean, that's like sort of the really strong Parmesan that makes you start to salivate.
Yeah.
And this is amazingly plummy, the fresher one. It's really, really stone fruity. Which is that from the yeast? That's the yeast esters, or
it's a combination. The yeast esters is a combination of also because we're using the flowers of a plant. The heather has its own floralness.
Yep.
There's also, like I said, the wild yeast and things. They're at play here with, and they're playing with kind of the phenols of the smoke. We use very, very small amounts of the smoked malts. So when it's really young, those smoke malts tend to come through. It's kind of sweeter. If I just keep referring to, say, Scotch whiskeys. When you smell them, depending on the depth of the smoke that you get, it can go anywhere from like floral to almost like band-aidy, as we say in America. Like that kind of
plaster for the Brits.
Yeah, plaster. Where it gets almost plasticky.
Yeah.
But like when you take those phenols, those aromas, and then the wild yeast interacts with them, they break them down into other components, and they become these like new, almost fruity flavors and aromas.
Yeah, so you're taking something that perhaps is in some beers and it's breaking it down, and you're getting all different kinds of aromas as that kind of happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. So these two beers, you don't release these two beers, you then have to blend them.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got this really funky, very sour beer with lots of oxidation notes, and then you've got this one that's very fruity. It's definitely sour, but it's got sort of a more recognisable Belgian hint. What are you looking for in the blend?
What I'm looking for is a character that falls somewhere in between kind of beer and wine.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, the Heather Ale itself is not a beer. There's no hops in it. When you talk about oxidation, it's not the same as that kind of cardboardy wet paper oxidation. It's more like what you get with older wines.
A boozy, brandy, porty kind of thing.
Yeah, they get almost a little bit heavier feeling, kind of more body to them. It's completely different process than, say, oxidating beer.
Sort of an aging rather than a fading process.
Yeah. So I go in with when the blending comes down, I go in with an idea in mind of what I want, and a lot of it's based off of our very first batch, which was a single barrel actually.
Right.
It's been 18 months in a single Burgundy barrel, and that kind of became the basis
the
for
control, and then you work within those parameters.
Exactly. So we're working with wild yeast, wild bacterias, and we're working with barrels, and each one of these barrels will have its own individual character. And so that's really, I guess, where the real art comes down, is kind of, I want to try to create as consistent of a product as I possibly can, but also at the same time understand that it's, as the French say, terroir. There's a very natural, very kind of ebb and flow of the season and when we brew these beers, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but for me, that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And being surrounded by 80 barrels, all of which will taste in some way subtly different. Yeah, I'd love to come to a tasting where you guys start to work out your blends, and you sat there with all these things going on.
And that's literally what this table is normally done.
There you go, a bit of history. Yeah. Well, guys, White Hag do all of these amazing sours. We also tried this one, which is an apricot Brett Pale Ale that they did with hand, which is, when it's finished conditioning, is going to come out and be absolutely incredible. But they also make lots of delicious clean beers as well. They do a really lovely IPA, lovely session IPA, and the Puka, whatever you want to call it, is a delicious berry hibiscus sour as well. But almost like fruit juice. You can't tell. It's just a delicious thing.
And the Puka, like a lot of people see it in cans, it's actually made with the same sour culture that we have to.
Right, really.
Yeah,
but it comes out sort of lacto and lemony instead. Yeah.
We don't do any kettle sours here. It's all mixed fermentation. A lot of people think that just because it's in can, it's a kettle sour, but like
still legit spontaneous stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking me through that. It's a really, really interesting story, like a completely unique, historical, and now very modern style that you guys put out there. So thank you very much.
Yep.
And guys, if you do see White Hag on the shelves or on the kegs list, give it a go, whether it's clean or whether it's filthy, mixed, firm deliciousness. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Cheers. I'm going to finish this aged one.